Hello, I'm Toycat, and welcome back to day 2 of my special Advent Calendar Geography series, where for each day in December, we'll be going into the most populated country for a given letter of the alphabet, and since it's day 2, that means it's letter B, which is the most populated B country. Well, as it turns out, it is Bangladesh, and so today we'll be diving into the border situation in the country, as well as how it divides itself internally, and the demographics that lead it to the future. And I will just give you a spoiler right now, much of Bangladesh history is to do with its borders, with its nearby neighboring country India, the big superpower. However, I want to say right now that although Bangladesh technically is only the 8th most populated country, it is the 92nd smallest, which is insane to think about for a second there, and it also means that although it is only the 7th densest country, I'm going to come out on record and say that in my heart, Bangladesh is the most densely populated country on the planet, and the reason I'm going to say that is because if you actually look at every country that's above it, you've got your Singapores, your Maltas, your Gibraltar, you got a lot of places that aren't real country-sized countries, and so Bangladesh is the most populated country-sized country. That is an arbitrary metric, and you better believe this video is also going to be arbitrary because we're going to be talking about borders. Bangladesh borders precisely 2 countries. One of these is a much more significant border than the other, and to simplify the very, very long story, this is a border which changed in just the last few years. In fact, on this video and the start of the me goofing off and talking over Google Maps days, you can see me going into the old India-Bangladesh border, where there were enclaves in the border, i.e. bits of India entirely surrounded by Bangladesh, bits of Bangladesh entirely surrounded by India, and then the next level down was there are bits of India surrounded by Bangladesh, which were entirely surrounded by India. It was ridiculous, the border situation, and the reason that happened is because when India was a part of the British Empire, everything around here, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka, were all governed as the same, British Raj. It was all of the same area. However, upon the country gaining independence, it was heavily implied that there would be ethnic tensions, and so the simplified version of, say, the British drew some lines. We said, okay, all the people who are of one religion can go in this state. We made Pakistan with West and East Pakistan eventually becoming Bangladesh, and then we kind of try to draw things along those lines, and people hate that solution, but ultimately when you look at India, which is just the remainder, people hate that solution too because it's sort of split between different places. Ultimately, I think it's easy to be against drawing lines arbitrarily to create new countries, but when a country is going independent, it literally has to arbitrarily decide where it is going to be. If you tried to combine all of this in one place, you'd have an even bigger mess, and anyway, I do think that the biggest solution they have is actually redrawing the border, not just on ethnic lines, but trying to be practical, which they did, to remove all of the enclaves. So although Bangladesh and India have one of the messiest borders in the world, when you look at it, you can see it like sort of runs along some rivers, then cuts off, gives India like a random bit of land on this side of the river, then runs along here. Bangladesh gets the beach, but nothing else for some reason. It cuts through the river arbitrarily, cuts it. Like, if you look at any part of this river, you'll realize, indeed this border, it is entirely made up on some level to try and practically sort people, but it is a more practical solution than was given before. Ultimately, if to try and create borders is something that is, you could argue, a Western invention, and I would say to not just say colonialism bad and to try and just simplify things as saying, oh, someone in the past messed up, is ultimately there is a certain level of governance that you need to police any effective border, and this wasn't really present in the region in 1949, so as it has come in there since, a lot of tragedies and atrocities do occur along this border. India has a shoot-on-sight policy if people cross the border illegally, and so indeed that leads to hundreds of people being shot every year. Bangladesh has a policy of, doing something similar, and so they engage in frequent skirmishes, which is controversial, but arguably the only reason borders work in Europe is because we have 1,000 years of doing that in the past. So I think even when you look at the tragedies, you could say, well, I mean, that I really don't like it as, in my Western brain, but maybe that is something you could justify. The thing I don't think is justifiable is the insanity of how this is drawn, but ultimately this is to protect farmers who live in India and farmers who live in Bangladesh from being in the same country, and so yeah, you get the messiest border in the world because it is drawn on a case-by-case basis. Roads here, landowners there. When 2 countries existed as one and then try to separate entirely based on, religious regions rather than anything else, you get a border which is messy to the ground situation. Is there a better compromise? I'd love to hear. So that is the India-Bangladesh border. It is the messiest border in the world, and ultimately, if you look at it, it looks like Bangladesh really should be bordering Nepal over over here. The only thing that separates them is like this tiny strip of India, which links India directly to its, its six sisters over here, the smallest and least Indian-feeling provinces in India. And then there is a tiny stretch of border where Myanmar over here, or Burma, if you want to be Google Maps in brackets, we have the tiniest stretch of border right here, where, as you can see, Bangladesh borders on Myanmar. And what's the situation there? Well, it's actually really good. There are no issues whatsoever, and I'm just kidding. This is Southeast Asia. So what happens is Myanmar is going for a bit of a in polite terms, genocide, and a lot of people want to leave that, in polite terms, genocide, and so they try to go to Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is unhappy with that, and so this border is also controversial. Yeah, isn't that fun? Love a good controversial border situation. Ultimately, though, trying to one of the most fascinating borders, if you ever want to look at it, is Bangladesh and India, because you see all over classic mistakes in drawing a border, but yet somehow, despite Bangladesh being entirely defined by random lines somewhere, river lines that haven't been updated for the modern river in other places, entirely, like down to landowners' discretion and where the posts happen to be in places that make no sense and barely even benefit anyone. Despite two countries being defined perfectly this way, they are both relatively functioning modern state. Look at this. How getting from India to anywhere here is near impossible, and yet it works. You take a left turn at this intersection, you're in Bangladesh. You take a right turn, you're in Bangladesh. You just have to follow the road, and then you get to this other Indian community. It is absolutely fascinating that it works, and yet somehow it does, which is wholesome in my opinion. Unlike almost every other country we'll be diving into in this series, Bangladesh is not divided into states or provinces or really anything that is self-governing in any realistic way, but instead is split into divisions. Each of these divisions then has another municipality below it, but Bangladesh, by being such a small country, is very centered in the capital, Dhaka, which, has its benefits. It makes for an incredibly populated city with all sorts of concerns if you don't like being around other people, but it does mean that power is relatively concentrated in the center, without that being the issue where you're 3,000 miles away from the capital of your country. And so indeed, it seems as though it is a centrally governed country. It's divided into divisions, and these divisions are headed by a regional leader, but they just administratively do policies from the central government. And so ultimately, even though Bangladesh is always weighing up whether to make more or fewer of these, it is not actually doing too much on that. So Bangladesh, it is divided into regions. Here's the fun Wikipedia version of that. However, these regions have big major cities, administrative capitals, and not really too much else that would give the regions have identities because they are unique geographic places, more so with unique people, more so than because they have unique political influence, which is something very interesting, especially for a country of so many people. They are all ruled from the same place, and it somehow works, besides all the shootings and the bad things, which is great. Bangladesh has had a long-term reputation for being a low-wage country, and this is something that makes it very attractive for international corporations who are looking for somewhere where they can pay someone, $2 a day to work for a very long time making all sorts of manufactured goods. And this manufactured good transition does have its upsides and it does have its downsides, but the biggest one of these when it comes to the downside is as Bangladesh slowly moves out of that, you're noticing that the population slowly is starting to decline. There was a big bulge of population in the 20s to 25 age, which they should be paying a demographic boom right now. However, fewer and fewer people are starting to have children. This is nowhere near as extreme as in other B countries, which, fun fact, we have all listed here. If you look at Belgium, you can see it's much more extreme. If we look at, let's just pick another one, Belarus, I'm gonna guess it's much. Look at how many men to women are there. However, when you're in Bangladesh, you'll notice that it's a much smoother curve. It's unlikely to cause huge issues, but what it will cause is Bangladesh to go from being the 8th most populated country in the world to slowly starting to decline after 2070. It is unlikely that it will become a high immigration country, and so this is something that the country should be dealing with in the next 50 years. However, it is a well-placed country for that because it is very decently located. It is a very, it does have great rail connections to its neighbor India. It does have the ability to get goods in and out, and so ultimately, Bangladesh is one of those countries to watch in the future. It doesn't have a doom and gloom future, instead having a more reasonable population leveling up, and now the question is if they can level off the population, can they level it up as well? And that is something we'll have to all wait and see. But that is Bangladesh, the B country on my A to Z, but it takes 24 days, because they're actually, the joke by the way is because there's two countries in the alphabet which do not have a, there's two letters in the alphabet that don't have a country rather, and I was surprised to learn which two it was. I figured there'd be two very obvious ones, but yeah, let me know if you know immediately. Don't type it in the comments. I feel like I want to say no spoilers, but I know saying that's going to make people want to do it. So honestly, it's a fun game though, in my opinion, every day to work out which country we'll be going through next. Is the most populated sea country Chad? Is it Comoros? Is it Canada? Canada's a good guess. It's definitely the biggest by land area. And so that is something you can come along tomorrow to find out, because this is my fun advent calendar series. But I'm enjoying it a lot so far. I hope you've enjoyed it, because as always, second channel, don't care. I'm gonna go eat lunch now. Bye.